Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutritional advice. I'd like to talk today about why low-fat foods are grow-fat foods. Now, I'm not talking about foods such as rice, cereal, grains, legumes, high-quality foods that happen to be low in fat. That's not the purpose of this talk, this discussion today. What I'd like to talk about are those foods that have been created as alternatives to foods that are available in the shops, usually processed foods. So we're talking about cakes, biscuits, all the foods that people know they shouldn't eat. A number of low-fat alternatives of these foods have been created and are available in shops. Now, the reason that these alternatives have been created is because people believe that it is the fat in food that makes them fat. This is a commonly held belief amongst the general population, and it makes no biochemical sense whatsoever. It is completely absurd. It is not the fat in foods that makes you fat. But this belief has created or allowed the creation of a range of low-fat foods that people buy because they believe that they don't contain fat and therefore will not cause them to get fat. Now, this is very problematic because these foods actually cause weight gain. They cause weight gain probably to a larger extent than the alternatives that contain fat. And the reason for this is quite simple. When a food is made, is processed, a cake or a biscuit, it contains two things usually that are nice in the taste of that food. Two things that attract a human to want to consume that food, and they are fat and sugar. Those two foods are very attractive to humans. We have taste buds that detect these foods, and they send messages to the brain, and they act in a drug-like way. Sugar in particular has effects on the brain that can be described as drug-like. They are addictive foods. Now, if you remove the fat from a particular product, in order to retain the taste within that product and retain the ability of that product to attract people to consume it, you have to replace it with something. And generally what happens is the fat is replaced by sugar. So what we tend to find is that the normal versions of cakes, biscuits and all these processed foods contain both fat and sugar, and in the low-fat alternatives, the fat is simply replaced by more sugar. So you have two very unhealthy groups of foods, and I would suggest that the low-fat foods, the low-fat alternatives, are a more problematic food than the higher fat alternatives. They're obviously all very bad foods, and you shouldn't consume any of them. Cakes, biscuits, these kinds of processed foods, these are found in the Western diet, and they have no place in a healthy diet. But I want to talk biochemically about why the low-fat alternatives are actually grow-fat alternatives. Now, to be able to understand this, we have to have a look at the sugar molecule. The sugar molecule, sucrose, normal table sugar, is made up of a molecule of fructose joined through a glycosidic bond to a molecule of glucose. When you consume that sucrose, there is an enzyme in your gut called sucrase, which splits the fructose and the glucose. The glucose enters the blood and contributes to blood sugar, and the fructose enters the liver, where it is converted sometimes to glucose and sometimes to fatty acids. Now, whether the fructose is converted to glucose or fatty acids really depends on how much fructose you give to the liver. If there is a small amount of fructose passing to the liver, perhaps say from a piece of fruit, most of the fructose, if it is trickled into the blood because there is fibre present in the meal, will be converted to glucose and will go to generate glycogen within your liver. If, however, you consume a lot of sucrose and therefore provide the liver with a lot of fructose, the liver cannot cope with the amount of energy. It does not need all of that fructose. There is no need to synthesize more than a certain amount of glycogen, and therefore, instead of converting the fructose to glucose, the fructose will be converted to fatty acids. Now this is problematic because the fatty acids are now thought to be a contributing factor in insulin resistance. If you continually consume high amounts of fructose, your liver will be in a state of producing lots of fatty acids. Those fatty acids will cause a deposition of fat and lipids within tissues of the skeletal muscle and within the liver, and you will develop central insulin resistance. And this is a driver of weight gain and obesity. So, low-fat foods are actually growth-fat foods because they contain too much sugar. That sugar then overloads the liver with nutrients and is a cause of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is now thought to be one of the conditions required in order for obesity and weight gain to develop. If you are consuming these low-fat foods in the belief that they are causing you to lose weight, or they may cause you to lose weight, you are deluding yourself. These foods have been manufactured. They are Frankenstein foods. They have no place in a healthy diet. If you wish to lose weight, you must cut them out of your diet. You are consuming sugar. You will be consuming lots of sugar. That sugar will be actually causing you to gain weight. These low-fat alternative foods should be avoided by everybody. And that doesn't mean you should eat the high-fat alternatives that are also available with cakes, biscuits. You shouldn't be eating any of those foods. These foods are usually very high in sugar. They're very high in fatty acids. They tend to have trans fats and hydrogenated fats within their composition, and therefore they contain metabolic poisons. If you are trying to lose weight, my recommendation is obviously that you avoid all of these foods and switch to a high quality diet based on traditional eating patterns.